In the glittering twilight of Imperial Russia, amid the chandeliers of Romanov palaces and the choking smoke of peasant revolts, there emerged a figure so bizarre, so hypnotic, that history still struggles to define him. Gregori Rasputin was either a prophet or a parasite, a healer or a heretic, a holy man or a monster. Few men have been more deeply hated, more wildly mythologized, or more impossibly hard to kill. By the time his bloated corpse was fished from the icy waters of the Neva River in December 1916 AD, he had already become a legend, the peasant mystic who brought down an empire. Born around 1869 AD in the remote Siberian village of Pokrovskoye, Rasputin was an illiterate farm boy with no formal education and a reputation for petty crime. He stole horses, got drunk, and reportedly seduced women in his village before undergoing a mysterious religious awakening in his 20s. Leaving behind his wife and children, he wandered from monastery to monastery as a self-styled holy man. But unlike conventional monks, Rasputin was drawn to fringe spiritual sects like the Klisti, a heretical group rumoured to practice ecstatic dancing, flagellation, and sexual rites. Though he later denied affiliation, whispers of his ties to the Klisti would shadow him for life. By 1903 AD, Rasputin arrived in St. Petersburg, the imperial capital, wearing filthy robes and exuding the odour of raw power. His charisma was undeniable. Aristocrats were drawn to his intense stare, his coarse wisdom, and his reputation as a healer. He had that inexplicable quality, wrote historian Robert K. Massey, that compelled men to listen and women to follow. What set Rasputin apart from other mystics was his access to the royal family and the vulnerability he so easily exploited. Tsar Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra were desperate for a miracle. Their only son, Alexei, was born with haemophilia, a genetic disorder that left him bleeding internally from the slightest injury. It was a death sentence in an era without modern medicine. When Rasputin was summoned to the palace during one of Alexei's bleeding episodes in 1907, the results were staggering. The boy's condition stabilized. Some attributed it to hypnosis, others to prayer, still others to Rasputin's insistence that doctors stop administering aspirin, a then popular drug that worsened bleeding. Regardless of the cause, Alexandra became convinced that Rasputin had saved her son's life. From that moment on, Rasputin held an invisible scepter over the Romanovs. He was their confessor, their healer, their spiritual advisor. The Empress called him our friend and believed he was divinely sent to protect the dynasty. His influence grew with each crisis. Court appointments were made or broken at his suggestion. Bishops were promoted or defrocked by his whispered command. And while Nicholas II remained aloof and distracted, ruling incompetently from the battlefield during World War I, Rasputin's power over Alexandra filled the vacuum. The Russian elite were appalled. They saw Rasputin as a filthy peasant manipulating a desperate empress. Rumors of orgies, drunkenness, and black magic swirled around him. He was said to seduce aristocratic women under the guise of spiritual healing. He was photographed shirtless, fondling noble ladies. His enemies spread tales of him bathing with prostitutes, urinating in rivers to bless them, and boasting that I control the Tsarina with my cock. Even if some of these stories were exaggerations, they fueled a perception of moral collapse at the heart of the monarchy. The truth was equally strange. Rasputin did drink heavily. He did brag of his access to the Empress. He did accept bribes and favors in exchange for influence. But he also possessed a kind of homespun wisdom that resonated with ordinary Russians. He advocated peace during the war. He warned the Tsar against joining the front lines. He urged land reforms. And in private letters, he expressed genuine concern for the fate of the peasantry. "Do not let the people suffer," he once wrote to Nicholas. "Do not spill blood, for it will curse your house." Despite these flashes of conscience, Rasputin had become a liability. As Russia spiraled into chaos, military defeats, food shortages, strikes, conservatives, liberals, and revolutionaries alike began to see him as the symbol of everything wrong with the empire. His murder became not just a political necessity, but a patriotic mission. In December 1916, a group of nobles, led by Prince Felix Yusupov and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, lured Rasputin to a palace under the pretext of meeting Yusupov's wife. They offered him cakes and wine laced with cyanide. When he showed no signs of dying, they shot him in the chest. Thinking him dead, they began to celebrate, until Rasputin suddenly staggered to his feet, fled up the stairs, and attempted to escape into the courtyard. They shot him again, beat him with a club, and finally bound and threw him into the freezing Neva River. An autopsy later suggested that he had water in his lungs, meaning he may have still been alive when he drowned. But Rasputin's influence did not die with his body. Instead, his murder became one more step toward the collapse of the Romanov dynasty. Just 3 months later, in March 1917, Nicholas II abdicated the throne. A year after that, the entire royal family was executed by Bolsheviks. Rasputin had warned of this outcome. In a letter to the Empress, he predicted, "If I am killed by your relatives, none of your children will remain alive for more than 2 years." To this day, historians debate the legacy of Rasputin. Was he a genuine mystic with healing powers, or a lucky charlatan who exploited a family's desperation? Historian Douglas Smith argues that Rasputin has become a projection of Russia's own fantasies and fears, part folk hero, part demon, part scapegoat. Others point to the evidence that much of the scandal around him was fabricated by his enemies, including the Okhrana, the Tsarist secret police, who kept detailed records of his movements and circulated salacious rumors to undermine his standing. What's often ignored in modern portrayals is Rasputin's deep religious conviction, twisted as it may have been. He saw suffering as a path to salvation, believed that sin could bring one closer to God, and thought sexual ecstasy could be a form of spiritual purification. These beliefs, rooted in fringe mystical sects, collided with the rigid orthodoxy of the Russian Church and fueled his reputation as a heretic. Yet to many in the countryside, he remained a man of God, a peasant who dared to speak truth to power and paid for it with his life. Gregori Rasputin never held political office, never commanded armies, and never wrote great treatises. Yet his shadow stretches long over Russian history. He was the final grotesque flourish in the opera of imperial collapse, a man whose life blurred the line between miracle and madness. Whether saint or sinner, puppet master or pawn, Rasputin remains one of the most unsettling figures ever to stand at the crossroads of mysticism, monarchy, and murder.